Hi everyone, it's Jon Eyers from Harvey Thomas here again. Delighted once more to be welcomed by Wayne Barker. Wayne is going to be chatting to us today about a subject very close to my heart, which is sales hiring. But more specifically, he's going to be talking today about the progression from founder-led sales and making that first sales hire. Pretty important subject, so I'll hand over to Wayne. Hi, Wayne.
Morning, John. Morning, John. Good to see you again. Morning, everybody. Yes, as John was saying, when we talked through the subjects that we felt would be most valuable to you as an audience, we looked at that moment in the life of a business where the CEO or the founder has been running sales, achieved some success, but now it is time to begin that process of scaling, building out a sales engine. And so what I thought I would do is talk about the when, the why, and the how of adding new or additional sales resource in order to move beyond founder-led sales. So let's be careful here. Up to this point, the CEO has probably needed to be all things to all people, some or most of the time, and has done a brilliant job. So the reason we've chosen this topic is not because the CEO couldn't or shouldn't be leading sales. It's more that we all agree we want the business to grow. And now that we've had some success, there are new expectations to exceed. What makes it difficult is that hiring salespeople is a tough gig. Getting it right is even tougher. And we're all subject to a torrent of views and opinions with, frankly, no recognized benchmarks for salespeople. If you throw into that the fact that success factors at best can be ambiguous, then this really is a critical moment in the journey of a growing business. So what I wanted to do then was to suggest 3 considerations before you make the new sales hire. And let's start by figuring out the problem that you're actually trying to solve, because the language will be, we want to add salespeople, we want to hit higher numbers, but there is in fact a specific job to be done. And you'll recognize here that some of these points are not binary. They overlap. For example, navigating an evolving market opportunity is not exclusive to the role of SDR, but all of these topics and the distinction between hiring an internal salesperson, an SDR, and a field-based salesperson, a sales rep, they begin to describe the challenges involved in deciding what is the job to do, what do we need to hire. And they begin to poke at some of the assumptions we might make about the job description, the profile, the who, the where, and the how of that next hire. One option, of course, could be to hire more than one head. So I'm calling out that there is a distinction between the role of an SDR and a sales rep. It could be that you hire more than one in order to begin to build a team, to take this opportunity to introduce some natural competition. You may be lucky, and by hiring more than one, you may actually find a manager may emerge. And of course, in the event that one of them doesn't work out, then theoretically there is less disruption to the initiative that you've undertaken. Now, whichever route you take will be the one that you think makes most sense for your business. But we should remember we can't clone what it was that worked for the CEO as a salesperson. So we need to consider then, what are we actually asking the new sales hire to do? If we're moving from what we might think of as an accidental salesperson or sales manager, what is the role of a professional salesperson? So here are 7 topics, 7 hooks on which I think we can hang the skills, the achievements, the behaviors and beliefs of successful salespeople. Now, we will, of course, already have looked at the evidence of fundamental sales success. I'm not discounting that. I'm not saying that prior successes, experience, domain aren't important, but I'm proposing that these bullets that we see on screen are the foundations for the scaling of a sales engine. These are skills that we can grow, develop, nurture, and support. And until they are part of the fabric of how we sell, the CEO can't be released from the sales efforts, because what we will have is simply more individuals doing what they always did, hoping to succeed. Conversely, these skills describe a deep connection with the buyer, a bias towards trust and influence, but that is super important and is coachable and repeatable. The buyer, of course, is a significant factor here. Sales is all about the buyer. It's all about the customer. So understanding how the buyer views your own proposition creates a further context for the skills that we want to have on board. So this is the buying environment through the lens of the customer. It's a helpful consideration when prioritizing the skills that we're going to be looking for. It may even describe the environment that they come from. Success bringing a new concept to market will demand different skills, different behaviors compared to selling in an established market. There will be some overlap. There's no question about that. Very few of these topics are binary. They will exist in a continuum. But the filter, the customer filter, is very important at this stage in the life of a business. And we need to be honest about where we are and where our proposition is in that journey. Now, as I said earlier, nothing on the screen here overrides table stakes when we're recruiting. So prior success, meaning similar complexity, process, size of deals, definitely important. Identifying the hunger, that willingness to cold call, roll the sleeves up, a desire to be in sales. They are all super important and should be qualified before we get to this point. But recognizing what it is that your customer is going to need is vital if we're going to be successful. Now, of course, lists of skills or hiring hacks are genuinely 10 a penny. We can Google this topic. We can use AI and ask it to go and search this topic. And the construct of the chart is going to look very similar. Now, I'm very keen to play with the cool kids. So I thought I'd make my own list and let's see how that goes down with you as CEOs. So the question in my mind was, from my experience, from my own hiring experience, what does great look like? What were the attributes that were more evident in successful hires and less evident in those that didn't work out? Now, my language there is important. Hires that don't work out, it doesn't mean that they don't have these attributes. There are a bunch of nuances. There is always a context for a sales role. But the distinction is that successful salespeople, in my experience, demonstrated this evident behavior, practiced skills, and applied knowledge. Now, in thinking about how I approach this, I did make some assumptions. I assumed that we are targeting long-term relationships with a growing sales opportunity. I've assumed there is some level of complexity and that the customer sees value in the problem being solved. So you can read from this that I'm not thinking about a transactional sales environment. I'm not thinking about an environment where you can make 500 dials in a day and somehow that will lead to success. So the way that I've approached this then calls out some attributes that I think are important. So let me call off just a couple for you. I'm very tuned to the idea of remaining focused through ambiguity. I guess the reason for that is it's been particularly relevant for the last 2 or 3 years, and I'm sure will continue to be relevant for the foreseeable future. And it is also relevant whether the business is being successful and is on a roll, or whether we're facing challenges. I'm willing to bet that if you've chosen to join this call, your business is definitely not standing still one way or another. So the idea that a great hire can recognize risk factors, can compose and articulate mitigation to the variables that they'll face, that they're comfortable with change, and also that they're clear and comfortable expecting their leaders to offer stability, I think that's important. I think through the vagaries of sales, that's key. Equally, when I thought about practiced skills, of course, there are many, but challenging to understand, again, I think is important. There are many methodologies that salespeople will adopt, some of which target being challenging, being provocative. And I want to make a distinction between being provocative and creating a foundation for debate with credibility and not presenting confirmation bias as IQ. Subtle distinctions, but when we're trying to work out what great looks like, subtlety is important. Nuances matter. Equally with unlocking insights. Unlocking insights does not look like throwing down ideas, asking a long list of questions, being stuck on transmit until the customer concedes that they need to share some information so you can sell to them. The image that I would like to present around unlocking insights is that the salesperson should be characterized as a collaborator, a detective, an engineer. They're working with the customer to apply knowledge, apply learnings, yes, challenge, but to unlock insights together that are valuable to the customer that can be acted on. It isn't an IQ shootout to see who knows more about the challenge that is being faced. On another occasion, I'd happily go through these bullets, and together I'm sure that we could add more and probably improve the list. But let's pause there, not least because everybody knows the script. Everybody knows that there are attributes that are more important than others. Everybody will have their version that may or may not align to this. But the reality is there are no benchmarks. There's no chartered status. There is no singular profile for what a great salesperson looks like. There are plenty of opinions, but no benchmarks, no national database. Panini could not produce a sticker book for the 200 best salespeople in the UK last year. That's a fact. If they could, they would have, trust me. So even if you get to a point where you are comfortable with making a decision to hire, in truth, it is expensive. It will require lots of support to make work. We know that change will happen as a consequence, and we know that it's going to be uncomfortable for some people, if not all. So it's important then that we're able to have an idea of how we might spot the best candidates. And Jon and I talk quite often about the importance of process, both in terms of the diligence of the process, but also the creativity that we might apply and what we take out of the process as much as what we put in. So you'll be glad to know that we're not going to give you our top 10 hints and tips on creating a process. But I did think it would be valuable to think about what does good look like and what does bad look like when you are engaging with candidates through that initial journey of getting to know each other. So good stuff first. If I'm coming out of a conversation, it might be an introductory call, it might be a formal interview. To a lesser or greater degree, if it's gone well, I will have learned something new. It will have been a conversation notionally between peers, definitely between two people trying to make their way in their careers, and ideas will have been exchanged. Those ideas might well have been around current market waves and specifically relating them to your business. As an individual, this salesperson, they're going to be comfortable not only giving credit to other people, they'll be comfortable with their success and how they got there, but they will also balance the credibility that they come with and the graft it took to get there. Now, that's important. That's important. You're going to hire somebody who will have been hitting numbers. You need that person to be putting in the same level of graft for you now as they did 18 months ago, 2 years ago, when they started their journey to success. And they need to be articulate in describing that and demonstrating it to you. If we think about the bad stuff, and my guess is I've been involved in as many bad interviews as good ones. That's life. So the bad stuff, I've already referenced confirmation bias presented as IQ. A desire to ask questions is great. A desire to ask questions to give themselves an opportunity to confirm to you what they already knew and how important that is. That is not good. You do not want them doing that in front of customers. So that is a red flag. That is a bad thing to spot in an interview, but an important thing to spot. Let's get that out there. We're looking for people who are prepared. This is a two-way sales process, but on their part, they certainly need to be prepared, and our antenna should be raised if we know that this character is relying on what the recruiter has told them. That's not good enough. For a salesperson, that's not good enough. And the same is true if the conversation is overtaken by buzzwords, of which there are many. We need a level of intelligence, someone who's articulate. This person is going to be carrying forward your brand, your values, your credentials. We need to be comfortable that they have enough in their locker to do that. I then started to think about how would we open up a conversation that would allow some of these attributes to come to the table. And this is about thinking beyond what scripted questions might look like. So I've offered up some examples. And again, I'm sure in a group situation, we could think of some more. But the idea here is that we're offering up a canvas for the candidate to take over, to paint the picture that they want you to take away. And I've used these four. In particular, the theory on how you build a great team. That's a good one. It challenges them to think about not only growth, but to talk about change. It's implied that change is happening through the building process. And it also opens up a conversation about how they like to be managed to best effect. These are important topics, but we would get more out of the conversation asking an open question in this way than we will by asking a closed question in the form of a script. The same is true with the question, how would you describe your job to people you care about? That is a nuanced question that normally causes somebody to sit back and have a think, which is good. They're not expecting the question. So how do they engage with something that they weren't expecting in a meeting where they care about the outcome and a person whose judgment they are going to be dependent on? Basically, selling. So opening that up can produce good outcomes, and whether it does or it doesn't, it will be very informative about this candidate. Beyond these topics,
I like that question.
Yeah, you like that one?
Yeah, it's a good question. I like that, definitely.
Yeah. Have you used it, Jon?
I haven't. No, I'll be honest with you. I'm quite a poor interviewer. I'm not going to lie. I'm quite a basic interviewer, which is shocking considering the industry that I work in. But recruiters are notoriously bad at recruitment, ironically. But it's good to really, you want to get really into what makes a candidate tick, really, and what motivates them. And I think asking them to describe what they do to people that they care about is quite an interesting one, because they have to, as you say, they have to think a little bit about that. How do they approach that? And that's quite revealing, I think.
I think that's right. And to be honest, Jon, there is a reality or some common sense in the natural flow of when these conversations happen. So in the role that you perform and the value that you bring to your customers, there are, I'm sure, a dozen questions that are more important before you get to this one.
Mm.
This is a question for later on. And if we think about the process, but more importantly, success factors in the process, that point is borne out. So it's worth repeating here that the goal is to establish a sales engine. And we are talking about individuals who can become a part of that sales engine so that the CEO has the choice to transition away from leading sales. So to do that, we need an approach that is organized and repeatable and detaches decision-making from the whim of the CEO, or at least challenges established decision-making norms, at least that. So I would encourage that we adopt the same level of intensity to this process as we would to other critical business processes that are probably more mature and more in day-to-day use. The alternative would be to make decisions on the fly. So with that in mind then, picking off a couple of these topics, I'm not describing here an end-to-end process. As I said earlier, that's for another day, possibly for another audience, but more the success factors in that process. For example, the nurture of a community is super important. Creating the engagement, making available searchable materials, keeping those assets up to date well in advance of the moment that you actually want to engage with someone and share a brief with Jon is very important. Within that, knowing the market, planning for success. So knowing the competitors, but more importantly, knowing the characters in the marketplace. They might be with customers, they might be with partners, competitors, they might be in parallel adjacent markets. Let's not have that conversation on the day you deliver the brief to Jon, because that will lead to some rush decision-making. That will lead to learning while we're doing the interviews, as opposed to creating that community. In terms of the process itself, we should be thinking about this, the design and the management, not only through our perspective as the hiring company, but also from a candidate perspective, their expectations, the experience that they're going to have through this process, the on-the-day activity. These are all important topics. You know, these people are buying as much as you're selling and vice versa. So their arrival in the office or their arrival to a Zoom call, as we are here today, that should be prepared appropriately. Now, even if you decide, yeah, do you know what? That really doesn't matter to me. Okay, fair enough. But at least make it a conscious decision. At least make it a conscious decision. The same is true of expectation management. If I'm a salesperson, I'm going to be interested in the ramp. What should I expect? What will the numbers be? What happens if we're off track? What challenges should we expect to be going through together? What KPIs might we have in place? I know that all too often I have created that material after I found a candidate that I like. And all too often I've attempted to map the answers to those questions to that candidate rather than know the answers, understand for myself what that ramp will look like, and then have a sensible, informed conversation with the guy on the other side of the desk who is a sales professional, who has also been through this process a number of times. When we have gone through the interview process, I would strongly advocate that we use a consistent panel to debate the outcomes of interviews and to drive to a decision. I would advocate that there are a number of key stakeholders in the success of a sales organization, and unless they all buy into the hire and the ramp and the 100-day plan that takes you through that ramp, then we are already going to make it difficult for that candidate, for that hire. They will be pushing against the organization. So we should be very clear about how we get to a decision, and we should also be very ready to move to offer. Not wait until we've worked out how we convince ourselves they need us more than we need them, but let's be ready to go to offer. Not just because delay or ambiguity could risk losing the candidate, but because delay and ambiguity is a bad place for that candidate to start their relationship with the business. So let's be ready to go, the same as we'd be ready to go with a proposal when a customer shows buying intent. It's no different. I'm very aware that these points may sound obvious, and I guess they are. But in a business at this stage in their journey, moving away from founder-led sales, CEO-led sales, the CEO's to-do list often means that it is very difficult to apply consistent rigor, and shortcuts do get taken, even though we all know that some of these topics are critical. But no matter, a hire is going to be made. You are going to move on. You've told your investors you're doing this, a hire will be made. So when that happens, what next for the CEO? The CEO is effectively moving from the role of lead guitar and songwriter in this band that you formed to become sound engineer, stage and tour manager, a different role. Just as critical, of course, but a different role. And it's a transition more than a fixed timeline. We're moving from an organization defined by the CEO's own selling efforts to one where the CEO is the sponsor of a developing sales culture. And it's probably more to do with evidence and confidence than it is to do with numbers. But you can imagine here the journey that I've put on screen. And again, I have no doubt that if we were in a room together with a whiteboard, we could expand this list. But the journey looks like onboarding the candidate, CEO still involved in selling and closing, but transitioning the sales effort, taking on board now some performance management, and importantly, aligning the business functions to this sales activity, inbound and outbound. That is super important. It is a team effort. You're simply adding a new ingredient to increase the velocity of engagement with the market. The CEO, meanwhile, is going to become more of an active ambassador, existing customers, new customers, partners, is going to sponsor customer success around the organization, and will be taking on more new initiatives. This is a growing business. We have momentum. And driving through then to this sales culture where in time you'll be adding the next layer of salespeople. So we've talked through some of the when, why, and how of adding salespeople to an early stage business and that transition in the role for the CEO. The upside of doing this well is significant. But while the messages are straightforward, we can see that the reality is nuanced and that complexity is hidden in there that needs to be thought through with some degree of rigor to avoid the pitfalls that I'm sure we've all experienced in the past. Jon, I'm going to close there. I'm very conscious of time. Are you comfortable there that we've covered the right agenda, the right pillars to address this topic?
Yes, absolutely. I think, as you rightly say, it's a topic that could go on, and we could talk for hours and hours about it. And there's so many spin-offs from this that we could be doing. But I think certainly the content there was extremely insightful and valuable. And I hope the people that are watching this will find some value in it. I've probably got a couple of questions I wouldn't mind following up with, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, one thing I wanted to just go back to one of the earlier slides. You talked about two kind of key sales hires, one being an SDR and the other one being a sales rep. But there's nothing on there about, say, a manager or a director. A lot of the briefs that I take from the early stage businesses who are looking for that first stage hire, they all tend to want the same thing. They tend to start by saying, we need someone who can contribute individually, can go out there and hunt for us and bring in new revenue, but also build a team. So they're looking for management expertise as well as kind of sales expertise. And that's always quite challenging because the managers tend to want to stay managing a team rather than being out there on the tools again, and the sales guys don't necessarily have the experience of management or motivating and leading a team. Where do you sit on that? What's your theory behind that, and what would be your advice to anyone that maybe looking at that sales hire and thinks they want to bring a manager in because that's what everyone else does?
Yeah. Okay. So I think there's always a degree of nervousness in these conversations because we all set out to hire a rocket scientist. We want the best. We want to fill that seat. And it's very, very difficult to do that when what you are in fact doing is attempting to create a future. And as I said earlier on the call, there are no benchmarks. So we being human beings, we try to fill a quart into a pint pot. It's a natural reaction in this situation. I think the way that I would look at this when presented with this question is, unless we're in a situation where we have a plan, a funded plan, not only to hire, but also to invest in the support of a sales team, then maybe we would hire a sales manager who would be part of the recruitment activity to backfill behind them. I've seen that happen. Businesses that are on, they believe, a mega growth path, or they have a short window to protect something they believe is unique. There may be a willingness, a desire, the backing to accelerate, and they may choose to start with the sales manager and build a team around that person. That's possible. What's more likely is that funding is limited. You know, that would be the truth for most organizations. There is an ROI plan behind the hire, and that we would start with a salesperson for all the reasons I described earlier. So that hands-on effort, that continued learning in the marketplace, that coverage of the marketplace, as opposed to the danger of hiring a sales manager to do that job, is that huge risk of overhiring and the frustrations that follow, a risk of the wrong balance of outbound activity versus strategy. Sales manager is less likely to be coachable. Then we need to be honest about that. It'll be less obvious how a sales manager will earn against KPIs and long-term incentive plans, because who's doing the work at that point? I think there are a couple of other things to add. One is I would have a red flag against hiring a salesperson and allowing title inflation. So I would be against hiring somebody to hit the phones metaphorically and give them a title of sales manager as a notional incentive. Rarely goes well. The other thing that should be considered, and this is very close to my heart, is the role that fractional sales management might play. Fractional management could be in the form of coaching the CEO. So the CEO wants to perform that role but needs support, or fractional management in the sense of part-time sales management for the salespeople you're hiring to deliver those sales management disciplines that the CEO either doesn't want to do or isn't best placed to do. So those are the topics that I would bring to the table when we're making that decision.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. It's also interesting because at the other end of the scale, it's amazing how rare it is to get a first sales hire brief from an early stage business that is an SDR or just a lead generator. Everyone wants to bring in a 360 consultant straight away and then an SDR to support them at a later date. Whereas if you're not having the leads coming in, you're unlikely to attract an experienced sales rep. So your first hire probably needs to be a lead generator of some variety who's going to bring in the leads to pass on to the sales rep. But many people don't, kind of almost skip that completely, and they focus on bringing in a 360 sales rep. Someone's going to go out there and, really go and tear it up and go and bash the phones, as you say, and go and generate new revenue. Whereas it's likely in their current role, they've got leads coming to them anyway. So why would they make that transition into a role where there's no leads coming in? But as I say, it's very rare to have, we're looking for our first sales hire, we need an SDR, which is bonkers, really, isn't it?
Well, of course, now a lot of sales are done using outbound platforms, email sequences. So the role of SDR, I think, has evolved, and that evolution accelerated through COVID and the work from home conversations that followed and are still very much alive. Again, maybe that's another topic we can dive into in another session. But I guess, part of the thinking for the approach we've taken to the subject today is to look at the reality of our business and how we achieve sales success today, and why customers buy from us and stay with us. And so that customer engagement, the reality of that engagement is perhaps what should drive the conversation, because we want to do more of that at a bigger scale, probably more quickly. And if we understand that, then we can make an informed view on the profile we want to hire and what we think they're going to be doing today. Where are they?
Brilliant. No, that's great. Thank you very much again, Wayne. It was, as I say, very insightful, really interesting subject. I said we could talk for hours about it, but time is going to get the better of us. If anybody would like some further information, they can contact either Wayne or myself. The details are on the presentation. I'm also going to be adding this to our website with our previous presentation as well. And we've got another 4, I think, in the series to come, which I'm looking forward to. So for now, thanks very much for your time, Wayne, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, John. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.